Hi guys, welcome back to my channel Lush Foliage. In today's video, we are going to be talking about a very beautiful house plant called as the Schefflera, or also called as the umbrella plant or the umbrella tree. I'll put up the botanical name on the screen. It belongs to the family of Araliaceae, and the mature size of this plant can reach from 4 to 6 feet tall and 3 to 6 feet in width. That is indoors, but if you're growing it outdoor in ground, this plant can reach up to 25 feet in tall. But again, there are two varieties in this. One is the one that tends to grow really huge, and the other one is the dwarf variety. So usually in the nurseries and garden centers, the ones that are being sold are basically the dwarf varieties, which will reach up to 4 to 6 feet in height. Now guys, talking about the native, this plant is native to Taiwan, China, and there is another province as well. I'll put up the name on the screen. This plant tends to grow during the summers, and winter it tends to go into a slight dormancy. Now mine is a variegated version. There is also a regular version. I didn't like the regular version much because it's completely green in color. I preferred the variegated one, so I purchased this one. So let's talk a little bit in detail about the care tips. Now guys, the regular one and the variegated one, both of them have the same requirements. So please don't get confused. Both of them will have the same requirements, what I'm going to be sharing in this video. So let's start with the light requirements. Now this plant prefers a good amount of indirect bright light or bright light, filtered light or dappled sunlight. Please do not keep this plant in direct sunlight. The leaves will get burnt, whether it's morning direct sunlight or afternoon direct sunlight. The plant will do well if it receives filtered light, dappled sunlight or indirect bright light. If you're growing this plant indoor, ensure that you're keeping it in a place where there is a good amount of indirect bright light, but the sun does not directly fall onto the plant. Otherwise, the leaves will get burnt. Another important thing, if you are going to keep this plant in a very low light condition, then the leaves will fall, the plant will start to stretch and it will start to bend. So ensure that you are giving a good amount of indirect bright light throughout the day. Now guys, talking about whether it's a variegated plant or whether it's a regular plant, please do not keep this plant in a low light condition. Otherwise, the plant will not perform very well. So I've already spoken about this multiple times. Variegated leaves lack chlorophyll, so they do need a lot of light. Otherwise, the variegation will start to fade away and there will be more of the green color on the leaves. Apart from that, overall the plant is not going to do quite well in a low light condition. Now talking about watering, water your plant regularly during the growing season, which is the summers. During the warmer months, the plant tends to get into its growing period and also the soil tends to dry a little bit faster. Ensure that around 3 to 4 inches of the soil is completely bone dry before you go ahead and water it. Try to maintain a very slight amount of moisture in the soil but not soggy wet soil. This plant does not like to be sitting in wet soil for a longer period of time. Otherwise, there will be a root rot. Ensure that the container that you're using has drain holes so that the excess water can drain out. Once you notice that the upper layer of soil, let's say around 3 to 4 inches of the upper layer of soil is dry, you can go ahead and do a complete watering, that is until the water starts passing through the drain hole. This is kind of a soak and dry method, and then you will have to again wait for another couple of days until the upper layer of soil tends to dry. During winters, cut down on your watering. Do not do a frequent watering because the plant tends to go into partial dormancy. Excess amount of watering can make the leaves yellow. Especially on this, it will be very difficult to notice, but on a regular Schefflera plant, you will start noticing yellowing of leaves. That indicates that your plant is being overwatered. So you have to be extremely careful. Let the soil dry. Even if 50% of the pot soil is dry, you can then go ahead and water it. You do not need to water it very frequently. Only during summers, again, this depends upon your environment and climate because everyone has a very different summer. Some people have a very dry and hot summer. Some people have a very humid and warm environment. So you would be a better judge to know when to water and when not to. Just ensure that you're not watering it regularly. Otherwise, the plant will get overwatered. Now talking about the soil mix, I tend to use the same soil mix, which is loose, porous and well draining. I use a mix of coco peat, garden soil, sand and perlite. Sand will make the mix well draining. Perlite sunlight will make it airy. They prefer a slightly acidic soil, anywhere between 6.0 to 6.5. So you can use a little bit of organic matter or compost in the soil. They will do quite well. But always remember, if you are growing this plant outdoor in ground, ensure that you're not keeping it you're not growing it in a place where it tends to remain wet often, or there is a chance of waterlogging, because if that happens, then the plant will be sitting in soggy wet soil for a longer period of time, and the plant can easily get a root rot. Talking about temperature and humidity, because this plant is a tropical plant, it requires fairly high humidity and a tropical environment kind of a temperature. Anywhere between 25 to 35 degrees Celsius is going to work out really well. This plant does not like a frost. It's not frost hardy. It does not prefer a very cold environment. So if you are from a place where it can get extremely cold or extremely hot, then you'll have to move this plant indoor. And if you're growing this plant indoor, ensure that you're not keeping it under the air conditioning vent or a heater, because that will again damage the plant. Ensure that wherever you are keeping it indoor, keep it in a place where it receives a good amount of indirect bright light, but the sunlight does not directly fall onto the plant. Now, talking about fertilizers, you can fertilize this plant twice in a month during the growing season, which is the summers. You can even give it a little bit of heavy feeding, because it is a heavy feeder during the growing season. But during the winters, please do not add any fertilizers. The growing season of this plant is during the summers, and winters it tends to go into a partial dormancy. Propagation is very simple of this plant. You can do a stem cutting. Try to get a nice thick stem and cut it off. My plant is relatively very small, so the stem is not very visible. Ideally, you will find a really thick stem, which you can go ahead and cut it after you sterilize the knife, blade or the cutting material. After which you can just put it into the soil and cover it with a plastic bag to give it a little bit of humidity or the moisture that has to be trapped inside the bag. And probably after a month or so, the stem will start to root. Now guys, talking about pest attack, yes, this plant does get affected with pests. Usually it's aphids, mealybugs, spider mites, which will be hiding beneath the leaves. So it's always better to check beneath the leaves. Scale insects you might happen to see on the stem area. Whatever organic solution you have been using, you can try that. Because for some people, some organic solution might work, for others it might not work. But whatever you have been using all this while, you can treat them with that. So scale insects, mealybugs and spider mites are the ones that usually tend to affect this plant. Now guys, talking about the most important thing, is this plant toxic? Yes, this plant is mildly toxic to humans as well as pets. So ensure that you're keeping this plant away from the reach of small children and pets. Whether it's highly toxic or mildly toxic, it's always better to be safe than sorry. So keep this plant away from their reach. Apart from that, it's a very beautiful house plant. Whether you want to grow it indoor or outdoor, it is going to work out really well. Just follow these basic care tips of giving a good amount of indirect bright light, filtered light or dappled sunlight, and the plant will do quite well. So guys, that's all about it. I hope that this video was helpful to you. If it was, please hit the like button. And if you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing to it. Until then, take care, stay safe and keep propagating.